Okay, so what do we got over here, Mom?
Well, now we're adding some fresh salts. This is a Mediterranean sea salt that I like to put in. I don't use regular table salt. But you can. It's not a big deal. This is about a teaspoon at least. Not a little bit more, maybe 2 teaspoons. And then this is about half a teaspoon of black pepper, which I also use fresh. Now you see how it's kind of fatty on the top because the lamb is a pretty fatty meat. So what we're going to do, because we're going to try and make a sauce and we don't want it to be greasy, we are going to bind the fat with some flour. So you take this is probably about 2 tablespoons of flour. And this is one of those things that you kind of have to, I don't say eyeball it because that would sound ridiculous, but you have to kind of just see how it goes. And what the flour is going to do is it's going to soak up the oil from the lamb and make it thicker so that you're not having this soupy, greasy mess. You can, if you're trying to cut back on the calories, which I totally get, you can always drain it. Meaning you can put the meat through like a colander, like a strainer, and get the fat out that way. And then put the meat back in the pan. I like the fat. And because it adds a lot of flavor, makes it taste good. See, now this is still a little too loose for me, so I'm going to go back and add a little bit more flour. So probably for this, it ended up being about 3 tablespoons. But it's one of those things you're going to have to kind of just sort out as you go along. You want it to kind of coat the meat. I don't know if you could see the difference in, it's like got a little bit of a sheen now. Okay, and this is cooking, so it's all good, and it's not as fatty. You can see it's been kind of soaked up a little bit. Okay, so now that we've soaked up some of the fat with some flour, we're going to add tomatoes. And I have some plum tomatoes here. You can buy the puree. I like these, but you can buy the puree, and this is kind of, a little bit hands-on. I'm crushing the tomatoes as I put them in. Oh, we don't want that to happen. Time to clean the stove. We try to mash it a little bit as we're putting it in.
If you want to sort of avoid this, could you use the pureed tomatoes?
Yeah, you definitely could, but I tend to not buy them. And then we're going to add all the juice. So this is about a half a can. This is the big can. It's a 35-ounce can. So you can obviously use a can half the size. If you're just using sauce or just pureed tomatoes, you probably need the smaller can. A 16-ounce can would be enough of just puree. But I don't buy those just because I use so many tomatoes. I don't bother. And I buy the bigger cans. So you gotta kind of smush this up. You could use the emulsion blender as well to break up the tomatoes before you put it in. Okay, so we're going to stir this around. The heat is nice and high, and it's good because it's, browning and putting all the goodness together. See, now this is why sometimes cooking is not an exact science, and why you have to understand how things work if you want to cook anything. This looks okay to me, but right now I think it's a little too oily, so I have to go back and add a little bit more flour. Now there's nothing wrong with doing that and saying, okay, well, this doesn't look right, it's too shiny. You see how it's kind of a little bit too glossy here? And there's little fat puddles. I don't care for it that way, so you definitely need to soak that up. So you're going back and putting more flour. And again, there's nothing wrong with saying, okay, well, I have to go back and fix this because it's not right. It's okay. And that's why sometimes, we just don't measure because it's a feel thing, it's a look thing, and a lot of times it's a taste thing. I think that's better. Because like I said, the lamb is very, very, it's much more fatty. The ground beef would give you the same problem. If you used ground turkey or ground chicken, you wouldn't have that problem. But the lamb or beef is definitely going to give you that fat, you know, that comes off of it. Okay, so that's much better.
Oh my god, it smells amazing.
Thank you, Nick. We're going to put a little bit more salt because we added another ingredient when we added the tomatoes. You know, every time you add an ingredient, you have to re-season because the tomatoes, I'm going to use an emerald line and sound really corny, but the tomatoes don't come seasoned. And then we're going to add a little bit of oregano. I don't love oregano, but in lamb it's good. That was about half a teaspoon. Okay, so we're letting this do what it do. And I've got a pot of water boiling over here.
How long has that been boiling?
Wow.
Just sort of been sitting
However
there.
long it takes to boil. Because we're making 2 boxes of pasta, you need a lot of water. And
You can just like let that go as you're doing all this.
yeah, because it's fine. Okay, so I'm going to try and get a little bit of more sauce out of this too, because I want it to be kind of like redder based. Okay, that's better. Okay, so we're going to let that cook for only about 5 minutes. It doesn't have to cook forever in a day. 5 minutes should do it.
So
we'll come back in about 5 minutes to finish off the lamb. I'm going to put the pasta in the water. And I bought a special pasta because we're trying to, I know it might sound ridiculous, but we're trying to watch our carbs. So I got one of those low carb pastas. When you have so much flavor in the sauce, you can use a pasta that may be low fat or something like that because the flavor of the sauce is going to take over. I got to put the lid on. And that's that. It's on medium heat. It's going to start to bubble. And then we're going to add some cream and about 2 ounces of goat cheese just to kind of finish it off. So we'll just wait for a couple more minutes for it to come up to another bubble. We're going to put the pasta in and clean up the sink. We'll be back in a few minutes.